Hey folks, Mick here, back at the Foam Forge. Haven't made a video in a little while, sorry about that. Holidays got kind of crazy. What we're going to do today is we're going to build a just under 36-inch sword out of a golf club shaft. Something that is still a little bit new to me, but I think they turn out really nice and they're very good and rigid, solid blades. So for that, what you're going to need is obviously a rod. This was just a thrift store find that I got for literally $1. Um, make sure it is a carbon fiber or a fiberglass shaft. And then I just cut the head off of it with the plastic ferrule still attached. That way I don't have to build up as much tape around it for my tip. And then I just took the grip off because we're going to be covering all of that anyways, and foam shaping the handle. Without further ado, let's get into it.
So right here, all I am doing is matching up where I want my sword to fit inside the blade. It ended up being 28 inches of blade. Here I am cutting 3-inch sections so I can shape them down to the required size that I want.
Alright, now that we've got our 3 pieces for our blade cut, as you can see, what I did is I marked them off at 3 inches on my speed square and then just drug it along to make sure I have a nice straight line each time, and then cut along that line and you get pretty good chunks out of it. This is 28.5 inches long and 3 inches wide. What we need to do with these now is we need to relax them so they lay flat. That way we can cut out our template and get them glued up to our core. And the way we're going to do that is we're just going to use a heat gun and we're going to flatten these guys out.
Make sure when you are relaxing your foam that you don't get too close to the foam. You don't want to melt it, which will happen if you get too close. But relaxing it helps it and makes it easier to work with. Just for those effects alone, it's a common practice that is a really good one. Relaxing your foam will always be a really good route to go, as it helps the build go along a lot smoother.
So now that we have our blade pieces flattened out, what we're going to do is we're going to go around on the middle one and mark where we want this to sit and a channel for our foaming glue that is going to shore up the inside of it, make sure everything contacts. What we'll end up doing is taking a couple pieces of this is the black Gorilla tape. I will do certain intervals along the inside of the sword where there is a wrap around it to create a bunch point, basically something for the internal foam to grab onto so the blade can't just separate from the core. We'll go ahead and get that done. Make sure we leave ourselves 1.5 inches of blue foam for a stab tip. That way we don't have any poke through, and we're going to go around the end of this tip here with some black tape as well.
So what I'm doing here now is I'm just wrapping some tape around at intervals around the core so I can have something for the glue to grab onto. Make sure that when you are cutting around your core spot that you leave a little bit of leeway so some extra glue can be in there, but leave yourself at least 1 inch of foam for the striking surface so it's legal to fight with.
Now that we have our channel cut out and everything, we're going to take another one of our pieces of our blue foam here that we have flattened out already, and we're going to match it up to this here. That way we can do our heat seal. A lot of people like to do a chemical bond with the Weldwood DAP For blue foam, I like to do a heat seal. If you've seen any of my other videos, I go over that. But we're going to go ahead and get into that, and then we'll be able to glue this up, and then we'll be able to put the top piece on, and then we'll have the partial remnants of a blade.
Make sure when you are heat sealing you do have a good glove on your offhand so you don't burn it. That's a mistake I've made a few times when I started first doing this technique, which is why I bought the glove in the first place. They last a long time, so you don't need a pair or anything like that, but just make sure it's a nice good leather glove. Once both pieces are adhered together, I like to go around the sides of them just to make sure that they are heat sealed. Next, I use the Gorilla Glue foaming glue to create my mechanical connection and activate it with a little bit of water, spin it around in there, and then we can set everything and heat seal the top section onto it. Make sure that when you are heat sealing, you go pretty slow as to give a chance to the foam to melt. That way it can bond together, and then you can't pull it apart. You have to cut it. Once you get around the whole back end, go around the entire blade itself and heat seal that side together.
Now that we have our foam all done up and our foaming glue is starting to set, you watch it bubble a little bit there. It's going to do that, and then it'll pour out, and then we'll just cut it off at the base of this right here, because that's the full length of what the blade's going to be. The 28.5 inches. But all we have to do now is let that set up and make sure our pole is firmly down into the center. And that way, once we have a fully hardened foam glue in here, then we can shape our blade and get onto the handle and the crossguard.
This glue cuts off really easily, and it's really nice. Here now all I'm doing is making sure that my edges are flat and will accept a bevel. You don't want to take off too much in this process, just enough to make it a flat edge.
So to mark the tip here, all we're going to do is we're going to take our Sharpie marker, and we're going to find our center point right here. And then we don't want it to be less than 2.5 inches wide, because our specs dictate that we cannot have over 1.5 inches of the tip showing. So what we're going to do is round out this side right here, and we're going to go off of the edge line of this to make sure that we don't have too big of a scooping tip, so if somebody gets hit in the eye with it or something, they don't lose their eye or get hurt. So we'll get into sanding that.
Make sure when you are sanding your tip in that you leave yourself enough leeway to not go over the 2.5 inch mark. That way you have a legal blade to fight with. Most people don't really like a rounded tip on their swords. I do. I think it's very aesthetically pleasing and makes me feel more like I'm holding a sword and kind of in combat and all that. Here is where I'm starting my beveling process, going down the sides of each blade at a 45-degree angle roughly, to put a bevel on the blade to have a defined strike edge, as later after plasti dipping we will be covering this entire blade with a stretchable canvas that is nice and soft, and it looks really good. Again, you want to make sure that you are not taking off too much from either side of it, as you will not meet the 1 inch of strike surface requirement. can be tough if you go too far, but with blue foam also you can patch and you can just heat seal more to it if you do go over. If you would like to see a video of that, leave a comment for me, and also leave a comment on other types of weapons that you would like to see built in the future. This process takes a good while. Just make sure you take your time with it. That way you are not ending up taking off too much of the tip or the sides. It can go really, really quickly if you press down at all on your sander, and you will just eat away all of your foam, and then you will end up having to cut it all off and start again.
So if you noticed, I put some bevels on here while I was sanding the tip here, just to round it out and make it all good. This is a checker here, given to me by a guy out at my Field Hero. Thank you very much. This is our tip. We have roughly 3/4 of an inch showing. So that means that we are just about under half of the limit. The limit is 1.5 inches. That can be showing. That would be about this much right here. We don't want that, but we have about right here. That comes out of the top of the steel here. And that way we know we are good to go. We can keep constructing on this blade, and we don't have to modify it by adding foam to it and then sanding it back down, which isn't too bad of a thing. If you have to go back and heat seal more foam to your blue foam and then sand it down to get the correct dimensions, completely fine. Once you make that heat connection, it is bonded forever. You can't really even rip it apart. It's very strong. So let's go ahead and get into the pommel. So for our crossguard and our pommel, what we are going to be doing is we are going to take some EVA foam. If you buy a roll of this, it is pretty springy and it has memory, so you can actually heat this stuff and shape it, and then it will stay as you shaped it. What I like to do, and you'll notice this piece is really flat. What I did is I took a iron and I ironed it out on a medium setting so it would lay flat. I will show you how to do that here a little later when we get into the bigger pieces for the handle and the pommel. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to get our template for crossguards, and we are going to try and cut 3 crossguards. Should work very easily out of this one piece, and then we will sandwich on in sections with some contact cement.
So here I am just marking my pieces for my crossguard, and then I will do the same on a bigger piece for my handle and pommel, which will be a one-piece construction. Make sure that you have a good sharp blade for cutting your EVA foam.
Now that we have our blanks cut out, what we're going to do is we're going to get this little recessed area and flatten out the bottom on the sander. That way we get them all nice and uniform, and they will come together really nicely to seat on our blade.
So as you're shaping, make sure to leave them a little bit proud, which just means they're a little bit bigger, so we can do our final shaping later on with our Dremel once we have them fully attached to the blade.
So now that we have these all kind of trued up a little bit, they're not perfect to each other, but they're what we need at the moment because we can always shape them to the finish. We have our Dremel and everything else that we can shape these with and make them be their final shape. But what we're going to do right now is we need to take our biggest one, which is this one right here on the bottom, and we're going to match it up to the base of this right at our blade and make sure that that's going to fit correctly in here. And then what we need to do is we need to mark here where we need to cut it, because this one will be glued to the sides and the blade, and also have the bottom glued for our hilt and our pommel. And so what we're going to do is just take our Sharpie marker here, and we're going to mark on the outside of it, and then we're going to cut on the inside of that line right here, because that's the edge of the actual pole, and we don't want to make it too short, too small, and mess it up for ourselves and waste a bunch of EVA. It is starting to not be cheap at all, so the more you can conserve, the better. I might have to get out my sharpener here soon and sharpen my blade so I don't have to change it. But now we have our pieces here, one for this side and one for this side. I might go ahead and cut a V-notch in these sides here so it kind of sucks to this a little bit better. You tend to get a little bit better adhesion with the contact cement when you do that.
Make sure that you put a healthy coat of the glue on there, as where it helps for it to adhese. Make sure it is fully dry before you do attach the pieces. Apparently I did not hit record on the segment where I attached the first pieces of the crossguard to the core.
Now that we have our guard all glued up and everything and it's good to go, before we shape it or anything else, we're going to also put a little bevel on this blade along it so it recesses a little bit, but we'll do that with the Dremel. I have a curved piece of EVA foam here for my pommel / handle pieces, and it's annoying to try and measure and cut and everything with it curved like this, and it has its memory still, so no matter what you do, it's just going to go back to how it was. So what we'll do now is we will iron it out and make it flat.
So here I am just going back and forth ironing, and you'll watch me flip it over and do the other side. That helps it lay flat. As long as you cover each part of it, it's much easier to work with EVA foam when it is not trying to curl up on you.
So now that we have our piece of EVA foam flattened, we can take our template. This is just a regular bell template. You can really, sand to however you want your pommel to be. I like to do them pretty big, at least, so they don't go through the checker. As you can see, this is the minimum size for a pommel, and it is way bigger. It's actually bigger than the tip one as well. Only about a 1/4 inch or so shows through this. I find it's just easier to go bigger than to go smaller. But what we'll do now is we'll lay this template out here, we'll trace them out, and then we'll cut them.
I like to save as much foam as possible by cutting these pretty close together. That way you don't have a bunch of wastage. Foam is expensive and I want to get as much out of it as I possibly can. Remember, foam cuts a lot easier with a very sharp blade, and it is also less of a danger to you, for you won't slip.
Now that we've got our pieces cut, we have to clean them up a little bit on the sander, and then after that we'll mark them on the back end of our hilt. And what we need to do also is we need to build this back end up a little bit with some Gorilla Tape. That way the pommel can't just slide off once it's glued. I feel it helps to have a physical connection there, or a mechanical connection there, so you don't run into problems whenever you're trying to fight and then all of a sudden your sword flies out of your hand, but you still have the hilt in your hand. Now that we have everything cut out, we're going to go ahead and glue this one and get it affixed to our pommel area here. This one here, I'm not going to back weight the sword, just because the EVA foam is normally heavier and denser than the blue foam, so it should kind of act as a little bit of a counterbalance. But you can like wrap fishing weights in tape and shove them in here, or glue them in here, whichever way you prefer to do that. That way you can have a little bit of a counterweight, but to keep it, light and fast, it doesn't need too much weight at the back end.
Make sure when you are applying your Weldwood DAP contact cement that you cover all of the surfaces evenly and cleanly. That way they can dry up at a relative time, so you're not sitting there waiting constantly for your glue to dry, and you can just kind of get them to all be done at the same time. Here I am making sure to get all of my points that have contact with other foam and the core to adhere properly before I go ahead and I put my contact cement on both sides of the hilt and the handle, and make sure you get under the crossguard as well, because your foam is going to have to glue up there, and make sure it's not going to separate and expose your core while you are larving with the blade. Once all of that contact cement is dry, you're going to go ahead and firmly press together all of your handle and pommel pieces, and then you will have a remnant of a sword.
Now that we have our pommel and handle and our crossguard all glued up and fitted, we just need to let this cure for a little bit, and then we can sand down the handle, get it ready for a leather wrap, and then we'll also take our Dremel tool to this, maybe use our blade to carve something into here, and then use the heat gun to open that up so we get some detail in there. Maybe carve a skull in the pommel, who knows. But all that comes next. Alright, we've let our blade handle and pommel and everything cure for a little while. We're going to go ahead and shape the handle and shape the pommel. I'm going to change my belt here first. It's done a lot of work for me, but I think it's time to go. So we'll see you when we start sanding.
Again, be careful when you are sanding. You don't want to take off too much and ruin your work to this point, because we are really close to being able to add embellishments and to do our plasti dipping. And it always sucks when you have to start over after you've put in a ton of work, so just be mindful what you are doing and how much you're taking off. When I shape my handle and my pommel,
I'm just trying to make it feel comfortable for my hand. If I'm making one for someone else, I try and keep in mind their wants and needs out of the blade itself. The most important part about shaping your handle and pommel is making it comfortable. We are going to leather wrap this handle, so we don't want it too big. Alright, now that we've got our handle and our pommel shaped, we are going to go ahead and finish shaping out our crossguard so it's not so rough looking and everything is nice and smooth. And we'll add our bevel to our blade here. And then I'm going to do some skulls on the pommel. So here with the Dremel attachment, I am just going to round everything out and make them look cohesive so there isn't any highs or splits in the foam. That way it has a nice uniform look. And then I will go over and bevel the edges and clean up the top piece here, making sure that it looks right. And I can put an edge bevel in there, and then I'll probably do some form of a heat struck inlay. That way the blade just has a little bit more wow factor. If you have made it this far in this video, please drop me a like and a subscribe for more video content on building foam weapons. This one will get finished in part 2. Thanks for watching up to this point, and I hope you come back for the second installment.